Good morning, everyone. Good morning again. May I invite the people, the panelists for the session. Amit Parikh, he is the founder and managing director of Transmute Capital and Management. Giri Giridhar, senior director of finance at Merck, Sharp and Doman. And Sangram Gal, India business manager, Archer EGRC. Can I please request everyone to join us on the stage, please? So just to give you a quick update on the people who will be speaking. Giri Giridhar, he is Senior Director of Finance at Merck, as I mentioned. He's had a career in investment banking, pharmaceuticals and consumer sectors. He was the CEO of pharmaceutical company Wockhardt, which you've heard of a lot in the news in the last year or two. And he's joined Merck recently. Amit Parikh, he's Managing Director and founder at Transmute Capital. And he earlier established Access Consulting, which was acquired by Genpact in 2007. And he's earlier worked with Arthur Andersen and Ernst & Young as well. And Sangram Gal, he heads India Archer, EGRC business for RSA, the security division of EMC. He's based in Mumbai and responsible for accelerating the adoption of Archer through the market-focused sales strategies. So the topic today, as Anuradha also mentioned, is visualizing and communicating risk upwards and onwards. And who better than, I would say, Amit Parikh to talk about it, someone who's been focused on risk all his life. Amit, if I begin with your initial notes. So here's how we'll go about it. Maybe 5 to 7 odd minutes of first with each of your talk, and then we move to more interactive, and then of course we'll wait for your questions as well as they come.
Sure, thank you, and good morning, everybody. So I just got introduced with the career that I've had. So I have a slightly different spin to it. So I just want to relate it to risk. So I started my career working with a firm which after 20 years closed because it took on too much risk. And then lo and behold, I worked with a risk management company which got acquired. And now I'm sort of working with companies in their growth strategies, which means I'm telling them take on more risk. So I don't know whether it makes me a risk expert or a very risky person. But nevertheless, since that's the label that I've been given now, let me sort of try and give you a little bit of a perspective of what I've seen in companies looking at risk management. And it's a topic that as CFOs all of you are very familiar with, and it's a huge topic to cover. What I thought I'd do is just give you a few snippets of what I think might be significant for you to look at and consider, and then we can hear the Giri and Sangram on the practical experiences on what's happening within their companies. But so there's a couple of themes that I thought I would want to talk about. The first one is about the manner in which risk is understood within, and I want to restrict it to the senior management of the companies. And because if it's at that level which sort of drives and sets the tone of what happens through the organization. And one of the challenges, or one of the key challenges of building a effective risk framework is about getting alignment at that top level. And the level of confusion, the level of non-alignment, the level of differences in the way in which different individuals in senior management view the risks which could face the company is actually quite staggering. And we've seen this consistently across many organizations. The whole, as I say, you got to identify something right before you can sit and manage it. So even before you get to risk management, the big challenge is about identification and prioritization and actually getting that alignment in senior management. So let me just illustrate just for a example, and I'm sure there are many more, and we'll hear from the rest. A company looking to expand capacity. So so as that big investment was being authorized or being evaluated whether it should be authorized, the questions about what can go wrong, what risk could happen. It's very interesting to see the different perspectives of the senior guys. For example, the marketing director felt that we could go and expand this stuff and expand our capacity, but he felt that the biggest risk was in manufacturing. The quality of products was not so great. There was rework as it was a capital equipment manufacturer, and therefore lead times and customer delivery dates were never met. So a lot of the risks that he saw was within the manufacturing setup. The manufacturing director, lo and behold, felt completely the opposite. He felt that the reason why all of these products are not coming up to standard is because the marketing director is securing orders of new types of products, new innovations requiring new designs, and therefore new manufacturing techniques, and it takes time to build those skills. So yeah, one could expect if you don't have standardized products that this could be a problem. The managing director of the company had a third perspective, which is that he felt that all this is great, the opportunity is there, we have a manufacturing plant that we want to put up, but the level of innovation and the quality of the design team, the engineering design team, was just not up to the mark, and really that's where he felt the biggest risk was. So this is just an example of how a important decision that was being made with involving a very large outlay of just a level of understanding or lack of alignment on what actually, and the reason why this is important is obviously that if there is alignment, then what are the risks to be managed, the resources get allocated towards that, etc., etc. So just one sort of common theme which emerges is this alignment of what are the relevant risks, what's the universe of risk, what's the prioritization of the risk elements relating to that particular organization or that particular initiative. I think there's a lot of time and effort needs to be spent to get that right. So that's just one thing. The second one I would want to talk about is that there is a huge amount of resources which get utilized and allocated to managing internal risks, which is risks typically get created within the organization. Maybe processes, there are people-related issues, etc. Interestingly, is that the amount of effort and the resources get allocated in, I won't even start with saying managing, but understanding external risk is woefully inadequate. And basically it's because external risk, as one would imagine, is far more difficult to manage. And in that you are a recipient of the risks which are sort of hitting the organization, rather than being able to influence them. So that is well understood, that it's far more difficult to influence how external risk gets managed. But I think the understanding of external risk is actually quite poor, or relatively poor, which is, and this could be things like, competitor moves. Of course, policy issues is well known, policy regulatory issues. But even as we come down to competitor moves, new product innovations, new suppliers, changes in suppliers, changes in, acquisitions of your vendors, a lot of stuff which happens outside of the organization needs to be well understood, and that is unfortunately, and it'd be interesting to see what you guys are doing in your companies, but that's sort of one theme that keeps on coming back, that we don't spend enough time on understanding all the relevant external factors which could impact our organization. That's the second theme. The third one, and this seems the most obvious one, but I just need to say it because it's quite relevant and it's probably a very important one to keep in mind, which is that if you would, all the effective risk management frameworks which have been established by organizations are ones, or there's a very strong correlation between those which have implemented them with a very strong alignment to performance management systems. And I mean, the reason is obvious, right? Because, you know, if it's part of KRAs, it actually gets looked at a lot closer. But time and again, we have seen organizations which have got that proper alignment, have broken down risks and cascaded risk issues through right from all levels of the organization, and then eventually find their place in the KRAs of either the individuals, the groups, the functions, the divisions, the geographies, the markets, or wherever way the company is organized. Once you start finding those, that clear alignment, we find that, you know, risks get managed a lot better. So that's sort of a third theme that you know, my experience of indicates that these are sort of the issues that are more relevant. And, you know, I just want to now give one final piece, and before I hand it over to the rest of the panel, is that as companies grow, the question is, so from a risk perspective, what might be the one or two significant matters that one should be looking at when you're in a growth strategy? And I think that for that, the common denominator, and there are many aspects which affect you know, the growth and the risk which affect a growth opportunity or growth initiative, but the common denominator is the one about defining risk appetite. And you know, it's a big word of risk appetite, but very simply put, it is what is it that you can afford to lose? As simple as that. Is what is it that when things go wrong, or if they go wrong, what is the impact on any aspect of your business, the interdependence with other aspects of your business, the quality of your balance sheet, but plainly put, what is it that what you stand to lose, and therefore what is that appetite? And time and again we have seen that in making a growth strategy, the flip of what can go wrong, what is the level to which we can afford to lose relative to where we are, relative to where we would even accept this type of a loss. That definition, that understanding, that sort of acceptance within the key stakeholders needs to, I think, is something which would be is important to get done. And that again is a piece which ends to be missing quite often. So that's my little bit of, as a risk expert as I'm being called, but this is some of the stuff that I thought would be interesting to share. But you know, what I'd like request the other panelists now try and put sort of some framework to this in terms of what they've actually experienced in the organizations that they've been working with.
Okay, thank you so much, Amit. May I now request Giri to bring his perspective, because often there is, and in the current environment, the challenge is how do you balance the growth that you need to achieve with the risk, that the heightened risk that we see in the environment today.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, recently I've started teaching MBA and executive MBA students on strategic financial management. And the first thing that you teach is actually what is the role of finance, and the role is that of shareholder wealth maximization. And then you get on to this debate of agency costs, where, you know, shareholders and managers are different, and therefore as managers, are they sort of doing the right things in terms of shareholder wealth maximization, or are they acting in their own interests? And therefore this whole discussion around agency costs has been very big actually. Like for instance, the whole subprime crisis in the US, and you know, you've seen articles where Abraham Rajan, who has people have said that the remuneration structures of bankers have led more to the crisis, and therefore it is not about wealth maximization. And the reason, so this whole agency cost issue is such a big issue actually. And the reason I sort of mention it, I mean, I would normally imagine that the shareholder is most concerned about managing agency costs, and it's not usual for the biggest shareholder to be acting in a fashion which impacts his own wealth actually. And as Stosh said before, working for Merck, I was at Vukat actually, where the 73% shareholder, who was also the CEO, was a classic example of the biggest shareholder demonstrating an agency cost to himself. He acting as a CEO, demonstrating a high level of agency costs, which impacted his own wealth actually. And I worked for about 2.5 years in that company, and it's a dramatic example of how poor risk management can actually make or completely destroy value actually. I joined at the end of 2010 when the company was already going through a crisis and the market cap was 1200 crores, and that was financial crisis driven by derivatives, etc. And over the next 2.5 years, we sort of worked to sort of strip down the different issues and right at the same time driving profitability, and we rose the market cap from 1200 crores to 23,000 crores actually, and that was in March 2013. As of a couple of weeks ago, the market price had dropped from 2,200 to 365, which meant the market cap came down to some 5,000 crores actually, in a gap of 3 months actually. I think for me, and the reason, and I played a role in the last 2.5 years as CFO for that company, and the biggest question in my mind was this actually: how do I communicate risk to the CEO, who was also the promoter of the company actually? And this was a great challenge actually. It was a very big challenge. What I saw as a risk, and sort of tried to tell the biggest shareholder in terms of what he should be aware of, was simply kind of, the response used to be that I am the shareholder, I know I am the risk taker, I hear what you're saying, but we are not a risk-free company. In fact, the response used to be that people like you come from multinationals and therefore are risk averse, but we are not risk averse, and we are not a risk-free company. So the whole language was about the risk tolerance. What Amit told about was that the belief was that a risk could be taken actually. I guess if I sort of think about that particular example, and I'm sort of saying it to show how it can impact dramatically actually, in terms of market cap. And ultimately, I quote this example often. You read the Richard Sharma book, which talks about where else will the money go, and in a world where institutional money is at the bedrock of all growth actually, none of the institutional investors want to put money in companies where they see risks being taken disproportionately actually. I think that is at the heart of it. Ultimately, it's all about capital actually. And I think the challenge that I think many CFOs, all of us face as CFOs, is ensuring that the risk is well understood. And obviously, we are not the masters of all the risk. We are to some extent the custodians, I think, where we have a role to play in terms of making sure that the risk is documented. And of course, Amit alluded to risk in relation to performance. And for me, the starting point of what I've always seen as good risk management is tying it up with the business plan itself. So if my business plan is saying that last year my turnover was 5,000 crores, this year it goes to 6,500 crores, I will earn X profit this year going up to Y profit next year, indicating a certain growth in top line and bottom line. I think I normally like to have a risk matrix attached to it. And why a risk matrix? Which is simply a 3x3 matrix, which says what are the different risks that I would sort of come up with, the business could face, and what is the impact that it could have. And ultimately, the impact is all about our ability to achieve the top line and the bottom line goals and any other financial goal that we have. And so I think that for me is the starting point of understanding and building alignment around what are the risks which can impact the business performance, and then working through systems which talk about management, alignment, and ensuring it's communicated, and you build a whole culture of risk and compliance. I think that would be my opening kind of remarks in terms of the importance of risk and how you need to deal with it.
Imagine a company that with that big. We know the company, but that big, sometimes not being so process driven as perhaps the minority shareholders would like to. That's exactly the question that I think, Sangram, you'd like to address, because a company which how can they make sure that they are more process driven? How can the CFO inform the board, not just the board? Sometimes that risk needs to be told downwards as well to the rank, to the much lower than the CXO level. How would you address that issue?
Sure. So I have a small presentation, few slides. I'm not going to bore you with it. The idea is not to take you through a lot of gyan session out here. Risk management has been a topic that's very close to my heart. I started my career in risk management, spent over a decade consulting companies in India, across the world, around 13 countries, on various risk management frameworks, methods, internal audits, and so on. And I realized, Indians particularly are very bad at communicating risks. So when I say very bad, they don't want to hear about risk. They don't spend enough time in understanding risk, and then finally, till you don't understand it, obviously you're not going to communicate down the level. So it's been always a problem. And I had a friend who was a finance controller, much senior to me. I asked him, you guys, whenever we start talking about risk, you just run away from the room. What's it? You take risks. I'm sure you take risks every day, as part of your business. What is it? So he had a very philosophical answer to it. It's our upbringing. I said, how does that matter? He says, look, we are Indians. We are brought in a society that believes in karma, right? You do your work with full faith, good intentions, and things will work out. God will take care of it, right? So, obviously risks are not going to go away, and you can't live with that philosophy. But jokes apart, I've seen generally in Indian, scenario, risks are either talk more in closed doors. People, are afraid of someone being called a naysayer. Stop, don't do this, don't do that. That's the perception of risk. So exactly what Giri said. The executive decisions for everything that you do, there's an executive decision, right? The CEO or whoever the business head wants to get into a business. The person who brings out the topic of risk is always seen as someone saying that, hey, don't do this, trying to stop the growth of the company, and that's a problem. If you hold on to the risk too long, you're going to be at a problem situation. You're going to find someone to give out the bad news, right? Like here to people. So you don't want to be in this situation. This is how you don't want to communicate risks back to your stakeholders. So let's talk about how do we communicate risks overall. And I want to tell you a story about it. As a professional, I told you I'm a risk management professional, advised a lot of companies, but in my personal life, I've taken a lot of risks. The others think that I've taken risks. I don't think I've done that. That's always the same. So right from my childhood days when I was in school, somewhere just before the board exams, maybe a year before that, 9th standard, I decided to change my medium of instruction from English. I was in a missionary school. I decided I want to go, give my board exams in vernacular. That's crazy. I don't think I'm going to allow my kids to do that, but that was a big risk. In my professional career, somewhere in between of a cozy career, I quit everything to start a startup. I actually started something. Don't ask me what's happening with that startup, but yeah, those are risks. In my personal life, I've done crazy things like doing a solo ride from Mumbai to Ladakh on a bike. I'm a trained paraglider, so I do a lot of paragliding stuff. I'm a trained pilot, and that's that's pretty risky stuff from someone else's perspective, right? I don't find it risky, and things were really hunky dory till the time I got married. Generally in a man's life, things are hunky dory till the time they get married, but so when my wife came, she says, "Just stop it. What are you doing? Paragliding is too dangerous. Doing these bike trips over passes, just too dangerous." And these conversations used to go on. We used to have a lot of arguments. So the perception of risk, she was acting as a risk manager, and I was acting as an executive. I'm saying I'm taking the risk. So these are the conversations. And then finally, typically what happens in all houses, the woman wins, right? So she won. All my paragliding stopped, came to a halt. And I was thinking, is it that I'm not able to communicate it correctly? Because if you look at paragliding, there is risk, right? I don't deny. I don't say that to my wife though, but there is risk. Your glider could collapse mid-air. There could be a hole in the glider. Maybe your parachute, if it's collapsing, your parachute doesn't come up. Or maybe, the string or the brake liners, don't work. So there are quite a lot of risks in paragliding. Now, when you look at it, I was realizing that I had not communicated these things to my wife in a context that she would understand. While there are risks, we do a lot of things that mitigate the risk. So before I even jump off the cliff with a paraglider, we do a series of checking the strings, checking the brake liners, manually inspecting the entire kite, that there is no holes, there's no wear and tear. Check your harness, there is an entire set of pre-flight check that you do, and so on. When you're in there, up in the air, you're monitoring your altitude, you're monitoring the wind speeds, you're monitoring that there are no spirals being generated, and you're not getting too close to the nimbus cloud because you'll freeze to death, and so on. So there are continuously things that you're monitoring. And these is precisely the controls that you're implementing, right? So now you know the risk, you know the controls that you're implementing. And if environmental factors change, right, the speeds, wind speeds are changing, or maybe there's an event, maybe you feel the brake liners are not as responsive as they should be, you need to take action on these. So these are multiple things as part of any communication that should go out. And from my perspective, I summarized, from corporate world, we are facing the same things, right? We are not setting the right context most of the time for the things that we are doing. So setting the right context. So what is the project? What is the business? What is the process that you're getting into? What's the risk? And what is it you're going to do to reduce the risk, the controls that you're going to implement. Exactly what I did, what I should have done in my personal life to communicate that yes, there's a risk and I'm going to manage it. Monitoring it, when I'm up there, I need to monitor how the events are happening, they're unfolding. Okay, so those are the external circumstances. That's very important. How do you tie that in, right? So that's something even in corporate world, most of the people who have implemented risk management program, they set the context, put in a risk register, but finally, there's no monitoring to it. The risks change, right? They're not static. How do you do it? That's pretty tough. And then finally, linking the control compliance to actual risk scores. So you believe when a control, a risk is reduced only when the control is working correctly, right? Again, going back to my paragliding example, the controls that I have in place are, I have my helmet, I have my brake liners, I have things that I can control, right? If my altimeter is not working properly, I can't see the altitude, my control is not working. I need to take action on that, I need to come back. So these are the three principles which I summarize, are the crux of risk, any successful risk management program. And I'll link it to my life because somehow, I try to do a lot of things other than risk management, but my life comes a full circle and end up in risk management. So finally, I had a philosophy by which I need to live by. So risk always is a difficult topic, and this is a fantastic cube, the magic cube. A lot of you have seen it, some of you have tried to implement it, but very tough. Somewhere in late 90s, there is a COSO framework. Those who have not seen it, a group of consultants got together. They created this fantastic framework, huge document, which looked at risk from perspectives, how do you monitor it, how do you control it, look at external events, everything's there, and then, strategic, operational, financial, and all those things. But how do you implement this? It's a good framework. I took a few years to understand it in completeness because it is a complex one. You need a process to do it. You can't do it without a process, you can't do it without data. Without data, you're at this situation, right? What you're basically looking at, you're living on hope that things will work out. This is not where you want to be in life and in corporate. So, a framework, possibly just the COSO framework realigned a bit. This is what, we work with as a company, automating various parts of risk management into a single process, ensuring that the events are monitored and then you act upon them. Very important. But finally, this is a framework that requires automation. Small companies, few people, you can do it manually. But if you're a large company, ensuring that there's a relationship between the various types of risks in there. They're ensuring that the controls compliance, the external events actually feed back in the loop. They complete the loop. That needs automation, and that's something that everyone needs to really look at. And finally, the biggest risk of all is not taking the risk, right? There are going to be executive decisions. You are going to get into risky business, and you are going to take on risky projects. Now, how do you understand the risks? How do you manage the risks? And then how do you tackle them? And there are going to be residual risks that are there. but do you understand them? So that's very important. And possibly that's the reason I've been able to do this in my personal life, and I'm back to paragliding, I'm back to bike riding on high passes across the world, and that's something that's really worked for me in personal life, and I've seen this also work in corporates in the risk management framework. So yeah, do take risks, but understand them. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sangram. The question that pops up, and as Giri mentioned, and Amit, I'll put this question to you. For a company which is smaller, is it easier to get the picture for the risk? And for a larger company, without a proper system in place, is there more difficult? And given the kind of environment and also the competitive environment that exists today.
Yes, that's obviously.
I think the mic.
Yeah, no, clearly in a smaller environment, the fewer number of people, by definition, communication is more frequent, less formal, doesn't need to be very formal. And therefore, the understanding of risk or any matter, not just risk, any communication within the relevant stakeholders, the leadership who's driving the organization. It's far more easier to do without, big processes invested in big processes. But in a larger organization, you need to actually be more conscious of the fact that you need to have that communication. And I think we all talked about the importance of, I started saying that the confusion and the issues about non-alignment is a matter of communication. And it's just that larger companies need to have probably more formal processes of communication. And but I think all of us agree that communication in everything is critical and important. So yeah.
You have okay, Anuradha, and I also would love if we can have more questions from the audience. And sir, if you can identify, can we have the mic there, please? So that you can identify yourself and ask a question. Can we get the mic, please? Okay, Giri has a point before.
Can I just have one point?
Sure.
And then maybe
Sure.
I think one of the things you spoke about, I think Sangram spoke about, is that I think ultimately when we talk of risk management, I think absolutely correct that as CFOs, we are not here to be the naysayers. Clearly, we are here about enabling risk actually, and I think that's absolutely correct. Because we are to enable risk, especially startups, new businesses, new geographies, new product launches. Our role is to enable risk actually, and I think the question is how do we manage it is what has been said. I want to talk about an example which we at Merck are currently going through actually, and I do not know how many of us here are in the pharma business, but people would have read about what is happening to GSK in China, where there has been a huge amount of work in terms of Chinese investigation into allegations of bribery of doctors by GSK using travel agents actually. And I think it's been amazing to see how how we at Merck kind of look at some of these things actually. I think, and I'll give you an example of how, because what is very common in the pharma industry is the whole issue of doctor education, continuing medical education actually, and where doctors are taken to events locally, internationally, in terms of making sure they know about what they need to do with the patient, because the whole language in an innovator company like ours is about treatment choice actually, and unlike in a generic company which might be pushing through a product, in an innovator company like ours, it's all about treatment choice. So for instance, I've been recently in discussions around diabetes as an example. The whole strategic planning process talks about what is the treatment choice for diabetes actually. Is when a naive patient comes with a the sugar levels of 170 or so rather than 100, and with a HbA1c of 8, what does the doctor start with? Does he start with metformin? I do not know how many of you are people with diabetes actually. Does he start with the sulfa stuff, or does he start with the DPP-4 that we market? So we begin with the treatment choice actually, And then you go to the brand choice in terms of if this is the treatment choice, what is the brand choice? And therefore, this is a very, very well, the whole practice of taking doctors to these conferences is essentially help to continue the education. So the treatment choice, where patient is at the heart of everything, the topic of conscious capitalism that Subro spoke about, where patient is at the heart of the whole treatment is important actually. But somewhere in what has happened in the Chinese medical system is that the government hospitals are not funded enough, and the government of China allows Chinese hospitals to overcharge on drugs actually, and therefore it is alleged that GSK was bribing doctors so that their drugs could be prescribed actually. And now the response, which in terms of processes which have existed in companies like Merck, is that how do you ensure that the way you deal with these kind of events to ensure that you can defend against any allegation of bribery is fantastic. First is, how do you choose the doctor? We have something called a healthcare partner selection criteria actually, which means that before you invite a doctor for a program, the person who is inviting the doctor has to tick off on the criteria on which he selected the doctor. It has to be backed up with a curriculum vitae which says that here is a guy who is good in diabetes with whatever track record, and therefore that becomes then the basis for selecting the doctor. The event, and then you get into an agreement with the doctor, a one-page agreement saying that if he is being invited for a particular conference, and you get it signed off first, so you have his consent. Second, a trip is planned. Let's say the continuing medical education can happen anywhere in the world. Let's say the trip is the continuing medical education conference happens in London actually. It is for 3 days. Now the rules, the internal governance rule says that you cannot fund a doctor for more than the 3 days, which means if I'm going to say as a doctor that since you're taking me all the way to London, I'll spend 2 more days extra visiting Scotland, those 2 days have to be funded by the doctor. If all doctors are going by Jet Airways to London, if one doctor says I'm a British Airways member, where there's a 50,000 rupees additional cost, we have to make sure that the 50,000 is recovered from the doctor actually. This is the process of risk management, because the implication is massive. Implication is massive because if you can't defend that you are not doing anything which can be termed as an inappropriate benefit to the doctor so that he can prescribe your drugs, it becomes like a bribery. And in the US FCPA world, the fines are huge, absolutely huge. And one of the things that, to build the whole culture of risk management, I think one of the things that I've been absolutely amazed at Merck is this whole concept of my learning actually, which comes on to, at every, depending upon the function that we are in and depending upon the level that we are in, there is an automatic my learning which is populated as part of what you need to go through. It may be a policy, it could be anything actually. And not only that, there are fixed dates by which you need to complete the training. It is all online, it's all online, and you do the test, you pass, and if you don't complete, your boss is told, make sure the guy learns actually. So the use of automation to ensure that risk management, in all its aspects, in terms of education for instance, is kind of given. It's just been fascinating actually. So I think the whole risk management now can go to that level of detail if you want robustness around the risk which is identified at the top, but how is it implemented at the bottom actually?
Can I just step in? The bunch of things that have struck me in what the panel has said, and I want to actually get the audience to respond. One is the desire to not talk about it, right? Which is a cultural thing that Sangram referred to. Is that true? Is that something that resonates with the room? Do you hesitate to communicate risk in your company?
Private growth. So you become growth impediments rather than saying we can all grow, but let's collaborate with risk. So I think
right. I think that's the piece that I was struggling with, because I don't know whether it is about the culture in India or it is the role of the CFO that is now trying to very eagerly walk away from being viewed as a constant naysayer and talk about partnering growth. I think the point that Mr. Singhvi made yesterday was equally sort of ties into what we are talking about, that there has been an almost growth at any cost kind of approach in all companies, and we are actually saying that some growth needn't actually be as good, and is it the CFO's role to step in and point that out, right? That if it is not appropriate growth or it is cancerous. So I'm going to come to you in a minute, sir. And I think the third thing that I actually want to again open up to the floor is that is this about automation is clearly important, but something that I've been hearing over the last couple of years is that it's an 80-20 principle that gets applied to risk and the world and the business world at large, that you can do what you like, but the change is so rapid in the environment that you actually have to just be prepared for stuff that you don't know about. And how does that get featured into these fantastic dashboards that operate well when the stuff that is fed into it is appropriate? But what do you do when you just feel inadequate in terms of the data and the information that you have? So just 3 points, and if we can get some comments around it, and then I'll come to the panel in a minute. Yes, can I first go to Sandeep? Yeah.
I have just 2 observations to make.
Can you use the mic, please?
Yes, okay.
So, just 2 observations. One is that, obviously nobody likes in any discussion that there's a finance guy and he comes and says, no, you can't do it. But I think what I have found in my organization being very deceptive is if you provide a solution. So, instead of a finance guy only wearing a naysayer's hat and saying, this you can't do because it is risky, the business guy logically will say, okay, I have a job to run a business. Can you suggest an alternate way of doing this particular transaction? And that makes the whole discussion very positive. The second observation about managing risk. I also work for a company where the promoters own over 70%, very much like the VOCAD experience. But what I have found difference in terms of how risk has to be managed, and this is the philosophy which comes from the promoters of my company, is that if you are paranoid about that risk, first, one is most of us maybe at times go through a process of doing risk management where we become so process focused that we probably miss the wood for the trees. What I have seen is that if you, and there are few things particularly in my organization where we are paranoid about in terms of the way you manage that risk. And that makes you, it doesn't make you into a situation of paralysis. Actually, you then find answers. But if you are so paranoid about that particular risk happening, you 100% will manage it proactively.
Amit, were you looking to respond? Yeah.
No, I mean, so I was just trying to sort of, put this in context of what all of us were saying. Which is the point that you made. I want to start with that, is that the rate at which risks are changing, right? And I sort of go back to the earlier point that I was making, is about our understanding of the external environment. And I really would like, an honest view of this group, of on a scale of 1 to 10, or let's say in a percentage wise, how much time you spend on managing internal and process risk, and how much time you spend on understanding, I'm not even saying managing, I'm saying understanding external risk. So, if you'd be honest and anybody give a response to that, is that how much time are, when I say you, I mean your organization, I don't mean you personally as CFOs.
Just to get a sense of response, we should ask more or less. More on internal processes and risk. Honest. So, and more on external is the other half? More on external? So, smaller number on external.
Yeah. So and I think this is not surprising.
That also depends on where you are on the curve, right? In terms of within your organization, within your industry. A lot of that really depends on where you are. I mean, you might have a real crisis internally. What are you going to do? Worry about external risks. You've got a lot of act to do here. I mean, I'm not sure if there's a real right answer about internal and external also.
No, I don't think it's right or wrong. I think it's just, I think it's just an indication of where things are. Yes.
I'd like to say that there's an
on नहीं है.
He says train well, do your all preparations, but always make sure for some risk you have to go back to the priest and check from him that things are okay or not. Because they can't do this is third party, this is something which you cannot arrange because the way mortality is happening in this country at this point of time, the way the policies are being changed. I mean, you can't be more paranoid about the risk and start thinking of all the risk and then wait for the risk to think that's a little down and not I think you have to just believe the Almighty and then go for it.
So is the Almighty the balancing factor there?
Yes, sir.
I would, okay.
Sorry, who will?
Sorry. So I thought, I'll just, get yesterday's presentation into context. And exactly some of the things, the way, I know there's really, if you believe in God and possibly, good things might happen. But the way I look at it, that he went back and actually checked with this priest that, it's still a good time. So that's the way I look at it. Are the factors which are not in my control, are they still favorable? So that's like going back, getting a feedback, whether that feedback, is from a priest or maybe from a market research or maybe, a real competition talking, that's a different point to debate, how would I address it. But really, that's a feedback, it's a continuous loop that you put back into place and see, whether the factors are still what you thought them to be. I think that's very important.
Yeah, just one second. Shandev, and then I'll come to Mitch.
One point I'd like to make, while we need to automate this process in risk management for bigger organizations, but what is more important to sense of, to bring in a sense of purpose. Otherwise, what happens is the process is automated, but you just sort of tick the box, and most of the times you land up in a situation where you're not even aware. So, bringing in that sense of urgency and the right education, that's the key to the risk management process.
That is true actually. I think building a risk culture is very important. I think when we talk of communication, it is downwards, upwards and sideways. And I think people must be willing to listen all the time.
Hemant Joshi here from Deloitte. Two comments. One is, I think while we focus on the hard aspects of the risk management in terms of tools and other things, I think the qualitative aspects are very important. And what I mean by qualitative is things like tone at the top, the culture. I think these are very, very critical. And if the tone at the top and culture are not appropriate, I think no amount of very elaborate risk management will work. Classic examples, Enron and Satya. I mean, if you look at the board members and the processes, who's were on the board, and it all failed. The other thing is, the tools I have seen in so many audit committees and board the discussions that, there is no disrespect to RSA, and we also use a lot of tools, but lot of comments which keep coming from very, very senior directors. Don't give me, the spin about tools and all that. Tools are only an enabler. Tell me how you are monitoring risks and what are the top 5 or 10 risks. So the qualitative and the focus on the risks and not so much on the tools, I think it's very important.
No, I agree with you, Hemant. It's absolutely, tools are just an enabler. You can't achieve, it's, garbage in, garbage out, right? You're not going to get anything magical solution out of the tools. But having said that, you're right. Most of the executives, when they say, and I've seen that they want to top 10 risks, and they don't want to hear risks when they're getting into new projects. So the point here is, yes, those top 10 risks, operational risks are important. And as Amit was saying, the external risks, and those mainly the top 10 risks that you get and people are using today are mainly operational risks, they're internal focused. What about the external risks, for when you're entering into a new business, looking at growth, expanding, and all expansions, M&As, and so on. So those are the risks which are not built into the processes, and that's something that's a change, a cultural change possibly, or a process change, and tone of the top is very important to get that in.
I just wanted to make a comment about, when I was coming to India in 2007, I think Walmart was talking to me about joining them, and I remember this conversation with Walmart. They said, Giri, we will look for 10 years to become profitable in India. We'll probably spend a couple of $1 billion, but that's okay for us because that's a small allocation from our balance sheet. That was a great conversation because you know how retail companies have struggled, but Walmart is very clear about balance sheet allocation. And today you read the newspaper about Walmart maybe deciding to pull out of India not because of its balance sheet risk allocation, but because of FCPA, where there are allegations, And I think, so one is the whole, internal, external that Amit is talking about. I think the internal part of it in terms of balance sheet allocation is probably the simpler one. The external part about environment is the other one. And on FCP, I think one of the things that, which is real, is that we can't be the world's policeman actually. Walmart cannot be the world's policeman if some people outside want bribes to sort of give you licenses on stores actually. So because that's not the role of corporations to be the world's policeman. The question is, knowing the environment, how do you ensure you operate in a fashion where you can defend everything actually? I think defendability has become a very, very big factor actually.
Giri, on this external factor, regulatory, what do you say?
Yeah.
Just I would like to take example of Wokhard, like the kind of regulatory risk what we carry. We may have a process systems like Wokhard would be having very nice regulatory department, but the kind of allegation what we are facing, and if it turns out to be, the kind of impact it will have on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
Now, as a CFO, how to manage that? Because even if you analyze in advance, it's very tough to manage that.
Yeah.
As a CFO, how to manage or how to provide or how to I understand that you said that your promoter tried to hint him, but he said, I know my business, it's a risk. But as a prudent CFO, how to manage that?
No, I think it comes with that, very simple. See, I think the thing about is that very simple risk management framework, where, you identify the risk. I think people should be able to talk about risk actually. I think many times what I think happens is that people have a huge confidence in their own ability to manage it, which means they don't first talk about the risk. See, typically what I would prefer is in conversations is that if I were to say, this I think is a risk, this is how I will manage, and therefore net of that management, this is going to be the, risk is either fully mitigated or there is some residual risk which cannot be mitigated. So that's a simple conversation actually. But many times what happens is a lot of unsaid actually. So you typically get into a conversation around, is everything going okay? And the response is, yeah, it's okay. There are some risks, but I'm managing it. Usually conversations end there. So you don't know what risk the guy is talking about. You don't know what management steps he's going to take to manage that risk actually. And all you're doing is to rely on that person's word which says everything is fine actually. In reality, you neither know the risk nor the management. And then in board meetings to sort of talk about, and you take assurance from your colleagues saying that everything is okay. And then when something like a regulatory risk hits you, the risk was not well understood, nor was it managed. And you get hit with the impact.
In fact, there is just to add on to what Giri said, there is a very interesting theory, and possibly it's true, that any risk that is old, right, you undercompensate for it. And any risk that you see that there's going to be an immediate impact, in the very near future, or you can see it in your face, you overcompensate for it. So that's again, something that's human psychology, right? So as you're saying, most of the risks, people overestimate their ability to manage the risks well, because those risks possibly previously never materialized in past projects, or maybe in the historical context. So they think everything's going to be all right. It's undercompensated always, and that's precisely the point.
Just to add in, taking off from what you've said right now. So this is a question both for the house and for the panel. What are the new risks that have come on the table in 2013, and how do you see, what sort of a risk profile or library of things are you looking at for 2014?
Exchange risk.
Exchange risk, that's one. What else?
Derivative risk.
Wasn't that an old one?
Nobody thinks that the new company law has heightened risk. Anybody thinks that the new law that's coming?
Class action suits. Yeah.
So there we go, some hands going up.
Anything else?
New government risk.
Okay.
Political risk. Yeah.
It's something inevitable.
I think that's been a sort of a thing that has, come over from 2012 onwards. Very sharp. Anything else?
Yesterday we heard Mr. Singhvi, and I think he said a very, very crucial point, that as long as you are basically doing the business the traditional way, that not looking for a high returns. Normally what happens, the risk and reward normally goes hand in hand, and he said if you are looking for a very, very high growth, over a long period of time you might be able to achieve by certain, eliminating some of the risk, but on a longer run it's impossible to do this risk management on a continuous basis. And I would like to hear his view, basically what he feels about risk management, because I think he can give us some insight, because yesterday he gave us a very good insight.
Okay. I think we need to do justice to the gentleman sitting right behind. He's been wanting to ask a question. If I can also get one question from you, a brief answer.
Hi, this is Rohan from Aditya Birla Finance. Usually we see that the personal risk appetite of a risk manager comes in the way of risk assessment. So what's your view on that? How can that risk be mitigated?
Okay.
No, I think give one example actually. One of the former Unilever chairman Fitzgerald, I think this is a great example of risk management actually. Was before he became chairman was responsible for launching. I think Persil was their brand, is it? Persil in Europe, and it is a high risk launch because in terms of the cost of launch. And they were taking on obviously Procter and Gamble, and what Unilever did was to say that they expected costs in terms of the launch actually, and they allocated a significant amount of loss on their balance sheet towards this launch actually. Fitzgerald lost $700 million apparently in launching Persil in the European market. He went on to become the chairman of Unilever actually. I think the reason good risk management is very important is that if without good risk management, it is seen as execution failure. Actually, many times people lose their jobs saying the guy has not done his job well. But I think with good risk management, you can distinguish very clearly between what is good risk management and execution failure. I think at a very simple level, I think this is something great value there actually for people.
Okay, that's about the time. If any closing comments we should?
Since Praveen mentioned it, Mr. Singhvi, is there anything you would like to say just very quickly before we close?
I don't want to hijack a few people who are sitting out there and they're analyzing risk. I only have one thought, that risk is finally a four-letter word. So take it the way you want it. It can cut both ways. And for corporates more importantly, and for CFOs even more importantly on that either you love it or you, I don't know to say that, throw it out. So you must analyze the business which you are in, day-to-day basis, just analyze it going forward. But you can't be a naysayer, of course, I heard that. But somebody mentioned about the board and somebody mentioned about Satyam and all that. I have virtually no respect for the boards. And particularly somebody said that who was there, and that's the biggest risk. That's the biggest risk, and in India we have, hero worshipping and, oh, he's from X place and he's from Y place. Hardly, I often say that most independent directors open their mouth in the boardroom only to pop a cashew nut. That is the biggest risk which you run. Rest all risk you can manage.
So, thank you so much. On that note, just to repeat that comment from Mr. Singhvi, most board members or some of those names that he mentioned or that were referred to perhaps, they open their mouth only to pop a cashew nut. We'll remember that. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you indeed for taking out the time to be with us. A big round of applause. Okay, so that's the risk part of our conversation today. We now have time. Let me invite Mr. Satish Mittal from Vodafone. He is CTO at the Vodafone Business Services, responsible for new technology products, combining telecom, IT and cloud. He has over 25 years of experience in the telecom sector and brings wide and deep perspective on technology. Prior to Vodafone, he was responsible for customer lifecycle management at Reliance Communication and for enterprise solutions at Lucent Technologies. Satish Mittal, please.
Good morning. I'm very delighted to be part of this gathering which speaks money, and allow me to take you slightly away from the language of money for next 20 minutes as to what technology can do for you and of course ultimately it means money, but it's slightly different than what we have been hearing. The good part is, in case you are wondering what's Vodafone doing here today, I think it's completely gelling in what has been discussed and being discussed right now. What is that a lot is changing around us. Let me give some examples of, other than the change which has been discussed and talked about, changes in terms of the financial sector, changes in what is happening in US, etc., and of course the political changes which is happening around here. This is a slightly different dimension as well, that what can impact your business. One is of course the global events that impact you. We heard all the eminent speakers that a small country like Greece can change the way we do business here. A statement from Fed can fluctuate the Sensex multiple times in the country. Let me take you to the next one, which is decision making is dynamic and distributed. It is no more confined to the boardrooms. The decision making is moving from one hand to multiple hands. Not only that, it is moving geographies. Take an example, I am sure majority of you are the people who decides multiple business events in your respective organizations. And you won't like your business to get stopped simply because you are sitting here. So you do expect that you should be able to approve certain business decisions on the go right now where you are sitting. Consumer is the center of innovation. I don't know how many of we realize that today the innovation is moving away from enterprise to the consumer. You might have seen your teenager daughter or son asking for iPhone and Galaxy S4, which you may not be using, but they understand WhatsApp and Facebook more than you guys. And why I am raising this is very simple. This is the generation which is going to be the consumer of your enterprise business tomorrow. Whichever business you are in telco, autos, you are in pharma, IT company, the end consumer behavior is changing drastically. And that definitely will need change within the organization for you. And social media we all talked about, clearly sweeping the way we had been looking at the enterprise as well as consumer. Today your employees expect that he should be allowed to go on Facebook even when he is in the office. Recently I was in one of the campuses of TCS, and I was amazed to see that the campus was actually looking more like a university. You have these young boys and girls sitting across, and instead of communicating like this, they were communicating like this, right? Instead of talking, they were chatting. Instead of writing, they were texting. So the way we used to work, it's completely changing. And that is the generation which is going to be your consumer, that is the generation which is going to be your customer. So what it means for you? You will see that obviously the businesses are under pressure to change, not just for cost reasons, but because of these external factors which are driving your business. I have put few things here, which is operationally agility, that you should be able to react to all the changes which is happening around you faster. That is what you as an enterprise would like to do. Faster decision making. As a customer which was expecting a physical bill earlier, or let's say a balance sheet which you were giving it to a stockholder or a stockist earlier, he would expect that to come in an email. There will not be many years when they will expect it to come on the Facebook, etc., etc. So the things are changing, and hence your decision making with respect to the customer's needs has to be faster. And obviously the changes, not only external changes, internally your employees will start demanding all these things from you. So that is the pressure which you as an enterprise will see. Let me give you some numbers. More than half the businesses believe that ability to scale their IT and telecom is what will make them more agile. Because it's not about how fast you are able to react, how fast your technology in your backyard is able to react. That is what the key is. Next one, happy customers, repeat business. I think that's proven. And look at the way a customer is changing today. This is the study which says 70% of the customers expects a response within 2 hours. And I'm not commenting whether the customer is right or wrong. I'm not commenting whether he is rational or irrational. But the fact is, we also, when we become a customer of any particular utility, we expect a response very fast. And that response need not to be in terms of only a voice communication. It can be a response now in terms of any media. It can be an email, SMS, anyway. He needs a response. And finally, within your own organizations, your own employees see a big value if you give them flexi hours, if you give them the technology which they can use wherever they are. Right? So do we see these changes happening? Do you see these trends in your business? And some of these may be hitting you today, some of these may be hitting you after 3 months and 6 months, but it is going to hit you. So what it means? So instead of kind of giving you some technology gyan, I thought let me utilize this forum to give you some case studies whereby some of the enterprise have actually adopted and leveraged their technologies, be it mobile, IT or telecommunication technologies, to make sure that they adopt these changes internally and externally. One, how many of you actually are carrying 2 mobile phones? Majority of that, right? And look around. When you go home, you will see there is a laptop which is for your personal use. There is a laptop which is given by the office. There is an iPad which office gives, and there may be an iPad which your teenager daughter or son is enjoying at home, right? And there are multiple devices sitting at your place. And the reason, majority of the reason, it's very simple. The enterprise, when he gives you a laptop or an iPad or a phone, he does not want that phone to be used for your personal purposes for 2 reasons. Not just he wants to save cost, but because of security reasons. Do we see that? That you are not obviously allowed to have the same ERP and SAP applications running on your personal device for security reasons. And hence there are a lot of inefficiencies built into the system. What if I tell you that today the solutions exist whereby you can use one device, be it your laptop, iPad or phone, and you can containerize them, you can compartmentalize them within the same device logically, whereby it can be used for office purpose and it can be used for personal purposes without mixing the two, still creating the walls of security within the same device. And I'm not talking of any PowerPoint presentation. This is real. This is happening. The case study which is put here is actually already adopted by one of the auto giants in this country, whereby this manufacturer, he has an interest in manufacturing, R&D, distribution, customer service, and he has given these devices to the employees, whereby the office data is completely separate and personal data is completely separate. Even to the extent that today the technology exists where if you want, an employee when he moves into the office premises, you can switch off the camera phone of that mobile through technology. And I'm sure many of the IT companies, if they are sitting here, they use this, where you don't want your employees to take photographs of certain processes because there is an internal risk. We just now talked about the risk in the previous session. So there are technologies now available, solutions available on the table whereby you can use the same device doing your office and personal purpose. And obviously you all are wizards in the financial calculations. Think of it, if you are able to save money either for the employee or for the company by investing into a smarter technology and saving multiple devices. That is a win-win for both the employees as well as for the company. And this is real, this is already existing. Number 2, communication is no more about a person speaking to a person or a body speaking to a body. Now it has moved from person to machines, where a machine speaking to a machine, and that's what is called M2M in technical jargons. So whereby a machine is talking to a machine, and again all has been talked about in couple of years earlier, but now it is becoming real. This is again a case whereby one of the largest giant in the beverage company, Pepsi, who is using machine to machine communication to track its vehicles across the country. Where the vehicle has reached, is it taking the right and optimal path of transportation, and in case the distribution has not happened to its one of the distributors in time, it is able to ship another shipment, and it is all happening automatically simply because there is an application sitting somewhere and there are SIM cards which are going into these vehicles. So it's no more a SIM card going into a mobile phone. And not only this, there are multiple such technologies which are already existing and working, and it's time for us to adopt such solutions. Some time back, talking about the health industry, there are devices whereby a patient can actually wear these devices and the ECG data, blood pressure data can be transferred online to your doctor, and doctor should be able to see the entire history and he should be able to advise you. And those things are already existing and happening in the country and being adopted by enterprise. Let me give you one more example. We talked about the money laundering, we talked about lot of cash transactions in the country, and that's a fact of life. How can we reduce some of these micro transactions which are distributed through cash? Majority of the enterprise today, the low end piece of low ticket transactions are still cash. When you pay to your workers or your contractor who pays to his workers is all through cash. And the microfinance companies, insurance companies who are supposed to collect the small ticket items from the field in terms of the money, it's all cash transactions. So today the technology is available which we have launched called M-Pesa, whereby you can transfer this small amount of money from one device to another device, one account to another account. You can collect, and this is actually again a case study by one of the largest bank in the country which is using this technology, whereby it's collecting these small amounts of chunks from various small villages and towns, and it is aggregating at one place. Money is transferred through the mobile and it is accounted. All the MIS reports, everything is on the go. And hence you can have a better management of cash transactions as well. And you are able to do this distribution on this microfinance model. And it's again, it's real, it's happening. Another interesting one. One may think what Metro as a company or a Metro Rails has to do with data. Okay, this is an example of a Metro company which is actually installing these Wi-Fi devices within its own compartments, whereby a commuter will be able to use his mobile, his iPads, his phones, etc. sitting in the metro and converts through the data back-ended by 3G technology. This is again real, which is already under trial right now, which is happening. So I'm just giving you the examples whereby the enterprises are becoming much more innovative because of the changes which are striking them, be it external change, be it internal change. So the employees' productivity goes up, you are able to save money because of the concurrence of the devices and the technology, and you are able to converse the telecom, IT and cloud together. Cisco, well-known name in a big IT company, taking care of lot of IT gears across the globe. Another example whereby they were able to combine their multiple distributors and channel partners across the globe as well as the country on a network whereby they use the same SAP systems, ERP systems, they are able to track what is happening throughout the globe and fully connected. Connected on mobile, connected on the wireline as well as the cloud. So these are some of the examples and this I can go on and on in terms of multiple examples which are sweeping the country as well as the international market whereby the technology is no more being used only for communication of voice. It is actually communication between machine to machine, communication from employees to this, and communication within multiple devices. I'm already getting the signal of 3 minutes left. So good part is this is my last slide just to summarize what we talked about. And I strongly urge you to take this message back home and deliver it to your CIOs. As Mr. Singhvi yesterday said, can we start thinking like a CEO that instead of only playing the part of signing the check, can we enable the enterprise with which you are associated with, enable to embrace technology, technology to save cost, technology to make yourself more efficient, technology to make yourself more proactive, and ultimately a better customer satisfaction as well as an employee satisfaction both. And that can be done through these solutions. We are available here for next 1.5 days. My colleagues are here, part of this gathering, as well as we have a booth outside where the technical experts are there. Anybody who wants to interact a bit more and understand these solutions and other related solutions, we will be happy to work with you. Thank you very much and open to any questions. Thanks. All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mittal, for that understanding. I think some people are very keen, some are already having their tea or coffee. I would suggest we take a break right now.